Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Alertus webinar series. My name is Vincent Busher, Marketing Coordinator at Alertus Technologies. During this presentation, Oliver Templeton will provide insight on enhancing your emergency notification using the Alertus system. Feel free to submit your questions during the webinar anytime, and they will be addressed during the Q&A session at the end of this presentation. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared with you after today's session. If you have any questions after this presentation, please email marketing@alertus.com. Now I'd like to turn it over to Oliver.
Thank you, Vinny. I just want to thank everyone for joining us on the call today. The purpose of today's call is to review the emergency mass notification capabilities that Alertus specifically has, and to give you just a general overview of the ways in which we can integrate and fill the gaps for your emergency mass notification needs. Now, as Vinny explained, my name is Oliver Templeton, and I'm the Regional Sales Manager here at Alertus Technologies. It's a pleasure to meet you all. Today's agenda, as I mentioned, we're going to have that 5,000-foot overview, but we're really going to delve a little deeper into how you are currently sending any emergency alerts, or at least make you think about it if you don't currently have a system in place. As with any emergency situation, there's always going to be challenges that you face, and the Alertus emergency mass notification solution has really been born through the customer. Understanding what those challenges are and providing a solution for those end users is exactly what we specialize in, and that's what we're going to go over today. More specifically, we're going to describe the different layers of notification that you have to think about, how you can activate the system, and how we can automate the process to make your buildings, make your facilities as smart as possible to be able to get that message across accordingly. Now, who is Alertus? So we were formed in 2002. We are based out of Maryland, just north of Washington, D.C. And we were formed pretty much off the basis of an emergency. So our CEO went to the University of Maryland, and there was a tornado, and the CEO, Jason Volk, came out of class, and there was cars all over the parking lot. A couple of individuals had lost their life during this tornado event, yet nobody was aware of that situation. The information hadn't been passed on. Students were left vulnerable. People were walking out in the parking lot after the weather had become clear again, but there was still no information. And that's where Alertus came from. It was born from that situation, and from there, we've built a number of different solutions that we can now provide for facilities, for campuses, and for a number of different channels and sectors, serving over 2,000 customers now globally. So how are you sending alert? This is the one thing that we want to make you think of today. We don't just want to take a single approach, whether it's just personal notification, indoor or outdoor. We really want to make sure that you're thinking about this from a layered approach. So what are the multiple ways in which you're getting that message across? Is it both visual and is it audible as well? Are you covering all your bases there? What are those challenges that you face? Do you have large facilities where noise may be an issue and a visual representation may be more beneficial? Okay, are there some areas where your mobile phone's not allowed to be used? How are you going to get that personal notification across? There's a number of different factors that come into successfully distributing an emergency mass notification, all of which have to be taken into consideration and will be discussed today. Now, looking at Alertus in general, we take a three-pronged approach to emergency mass notification. First and foremost, we want to make sure that we have that single point of activation. In the event of an emergency, we want you to have the confidence to know that through the push of a button or through simply selecting a preset message, that the appropriate message is going to go out within seconds. Second, we really look to integrate with the assets that you've already got within your facility. So you may have things such as desktops or speaker systems that your facility already has in place. We want to leverage this infrastructure as much as possible and utilize it to communicate with staff or visitors throughout those buildings. And then finally, we want to fill those gaps. So any areas where you may feel that you are vulnerable, where we don't have the capability to integrate with current assets and get that message across, we have the hardware and software solutions to be able to provide you with the ability to get that message across, whatever that issue is. So looking at Alertus as a whole, we really focus on the facility side of things. So we are a facility-based emergency mass notification provider. And this slide really gives you that general overview of the different capabilities that we have and the different solutions that we have for a variety of different areas, for different environments, for different facilities, whether that's indoor, outdoor, personal, or from a public standpoint. This slide gives you that general overview. Now, when talking about taking that layered approach to emergency mass notification, this slide is exactly what I want you to envision. So in the event of that emergency, I want you to think about how you are getting that message across. From an Alertus standpoint, we have the solutions, as you see with the corresponding images on the right-hand side, for both indoor and outdoor. But additionally, we have that personal and public notification capability as well. So if your facilities are made up of purely staff, then you might want to be thinking about, okay, how can I leverage their immediate surroundings and get that message across to notify my staff in the event of an emergency? What if my staff are outside and entering the building? How am I getting that message across? What if they are not in the building yet and you need to reach them from a personal standpoint? How are you doing that? And finally, if your buildings or your environment is very public facing, what messages or what infrastructure are you utilizing to get that message across to those public individuals that are in your facility? This is the led approach that we want you to think about and to have all your bases covered. So starting with, we're going to look at how we can integrate with your current assets that you have. Starting with desktop notification. So here you see the full screen emergency desktop alert. Everything on this screen, from the color scheme to the template and the text itself, is customizable. You'll notice that there is an acknowledge button on the screen. Once that button is acknowledged, the user who has sent that message out is getting real-time feedback as to how successful that message has been in its distribution efforts. So you get that real-time reporting as, okay, we know the amount of people who have acknowledged this message and how successful that message has been through the desktop notification. We can override a lock screen and we're going to wake a sleeping computer, both valuable capabilities, again, to be able to take over those immediate surroundings, regardless of whether or not that end user is logged into that computer or not. Now, taking that one step further, we have that full screen takeover capability, but we also have a partial screen and a ticker mode that you can utilize as well. Not every situation is going to call for that full screen evacuation emergency alert. Maybe you just have some important information that you need to get across to all those end users, utilizing those desktop screens, and maybe a partial screen or a ticker mode is the more appropriate way to go about getting that message across. We will see some of these notifications in action shortly as well. Next, staying on the integration side of things, VoIP phones, whether it's Cisco, Avaya, or just a VoIP phone in general, 9 times out of 10, we have the capability to leverage that asset and utilize it as an effective means of getting that emergency notification across. So as you can see here, we can leverage that front screen and get that emergency message over to that end user. At the same time, we will be leveraging the speaker that's built into that phone. That can either be an audible tone or it can be a pre-recorded verbal message that's going to be distributed. But taking it one step further, we can also leverage that phone and utilize it as an internal panic button as well. So envision an emergency situation. The individual user of that phone, in the event of that emergency, can dial a certain preset configured number, which is then going to trigger that internal emergency notification. Those appropriate individuals can then attend to that situation and make sure that the emergency situation is dealt with accordingly. So now you have a device that can receive and distribute that emergency notification, but you're now giving your internal staff the capability to notify you in the event of that emergency as well. Now, staying on that layered approach side of things, whether it's the indoor notification through the desktop or that VoIP phone device, or whether it's personal notification, we have a solution in place. Now, with that in mind, we have the Alertus mobile app suite that is available to all end users, and we have both the recipient app and the activator app. The recipient app being the app that all your staff and general users will have on their cell phone to be able to receive that emergency notification that is being pushed out. They're going to receive that notification as a push notification over their cell phone device. They have the ability to acknowledge that they have received that message on their cell phone, the same way in which they would be able to acknowledge that they had received that message on the desktop as well. Again, so you get that real-time feedback as to how successful that message has been in its distribution efforts. Now, similar to the VoIP phone in the sense that we were giving our internal staff the ability to notify us in the event of an emergency, you'll notice on the recipient app that end user has the ability to report an incident as well. So from that report incident feature, the end user can take a picture of that emergency, up to 3 pictures. They can geotag their location, and they can give a textual representation of what that emergency is. That message is going to be sent out and distributed internally for the appropriate personnel to then respond accordingly to that message. That message is going to be tied to the end user of that of the recipient app. So not only are you getting the geographical location, but you're getting the end user who has distributed that message, as well as further information such as the text or those images that the end user's provided. Now, looking at the Activator app on the right-hand side here, you can see how useful this would be because it's essentially a portable activation device. So wherever you are, you can activate all those endpoints, whether it's the desktop, whether it's those VoIP phones, whether it's the mobile phones, and get that message out no matter where you are. So you don't have to be sat in front of your desktop. You don't have to be within the vicinity of a hardwired panic button. You can simply initiate those emergency alerts from wherever you are throughout your facility. Moving on, digital signage override. This works in the same way as the desktop notification, but we can now leverage those digital signs that may be placed throughout your building. The advantage here is these digital signs are often strategically placed in high visibility areas, so we're already capturing the attention of those visitors that may be coming in and out of the building, or those staff, those personnel that are entering or in the area of a building that may be highly foot trafficked, where without the digital signs or other solutions, we would not be able to capture their attention and get that emergency message across. The digital signage override allows us to do just that. Now, so far we've looked at the different visual representations of those emergency alerts. One other capability that we do have is the verbal expression of that emergency notification as well. Again, taking that layered approach, we want to make sure that we're covering people both indoor, outdoor, from a personal and a public standpoint, but also from a visual and an audible standpoint as well. So leveraging those desktops to get that visual notification across, but at the same time, our text-to-speech interface allows us to convert that text message that you would be seeing on your desktop screens or your mobile device and verbally expressing that message as an audible notification over your speaker system or PA system throughout your buildings. So we simply integrate into your speaker system for that audible message to be distributed throughout your facility. I will give you an example of that shortly as well. Moving on, We can also integrate with your fire panel interfaces. So we can do this one of two ways. The first is to leverage the speakers that may be built into that fire panel. So your typical fire procedure may consist of the fire panel being pulled and the audible siren tone going off throughout your facility. We can leverage those speakers and verbally express that emergency notification that's going across. But at the same time, when a fire panel is pulled, we can not only monitor those fire panels and distribute the appropriate information as to which fire panel is being pulled, but we can take it one step further and automate this process so that when a fire panel is pulled, the Alertus emergency mass notification server is triggered to distribute that message accordingly. So if a fire panel is pulled in building A, the appropriate message is being received in building B to notify everybody not to walk towards building A or not to enter building A because of that fire emergency. So you can see how you can automate that process and then be able to deal with the situation as opposed to thinking about have you distributed the appropriate message at the time of that event. It's all about automating that process, giving you the ability to activate through the push of a button and knowing that everybody's received the appropriate information dependent upon what that emergency is. Cable TV override, again, we want to take over the immediate surroundings of those individuals within that facility. Cable TV, if somebody is watching television at that time, we are going to be able to effectively get that message across that television screen. Again, this is great for those areas where you may have a lot of visitors, high foot trafficked areas, and utilize those resources that are already being put to good use and now use them as that communications device. And finally, we can leverage your access control system as well. So what we are looking to do with our emergency notification is to be able to first and foremost automate it as much as possible, but at the same time set up scenarios where it's an if this then that. So in the event of this emergency, what do you want your building or your facility to do? Well, first and foremost, we want to distribute that emergency message so everybody is on the same page and everybody is informed as to what that emergency is. But second, in the event of that emergency, from an access control standpoint, maybe we want to open up that facility, open up that building, or lock down that building, depending upon what that emergency situation is. We can automate that process, and at the same time as that message is being distributed, the building is then acting accordingly as to how we've set that up in advance. So from an integration standpoint, I hope you can see the ways in which we can leverage what you already have in place. We're not looking for you to put a whole new emergency system in place, notification system in place. We want to make sure that we've utilized and leveraged your current assets as much as possible before then moving on to fill those gaps where you may feel vulnerable. So throughout your facilities, you may have those areas that we can tap into and get that message across. But during those emergency situations, if you have those high foot trafficked areas where you don't have something to tap into and to leverage, we can look to hardware devices such as the alert beacon, which is a great device in of itself to be able to not only capture people's attention with the flashing lights and the text on the screen, but we also have a 106 decibel speaker built into that alert beacon to be able to both from an audible standpoint capture that end user's attention. These alert beacons are wall mounted, run power over Ethernet. So as long as we have the ability to get network coverage to a certain area and we can run that power, we can leverage the alert beacon in those hard to reach areas and capture people's attention with these flashing lights, with the text on the screen, and with that speaker that's built into the alert beacon itself. From an audible standpoint, as we mentioned, we can leverage your current speaker system or PA system that you have within that building and distribute that message verbally over that speaker system. But we also have our own indoor and outdoor speakers, which can give you that capability if you don't have a speaker system in place. So if you had areas where you felt that you were vulnerable and where a verbal expression of that emergency notification would be useful, we have those hardware devices to make that happen for you. Finally, we have both the signaling strobe and the LED marquee. The LED marquee being an extension of that alert beacon. As you can see, it is a clock when it is not in use, but during that emergency situation, the text on that screen is going to be visually represented on a continuous loop. So you have that information at hand and people can see that regardless of the environment that you are in. We can strategically place these so everybody can see them in those high visibility areas. When that message is distributed, the alert beacon is going off, the flashing lights are capturing people's attention, but now that text on that LED marquee is expressing what that emergency alert is, so everybody knows and can respond accordingly. The signaling strobe working in a similar fashion. The signaling strobe is a great resource to capture people's attention, draw their attention towards that general area so that then you can pass on that next portion of the emergency notification, whether that's coming from an LED marquee, whether that's coming from a digital sign, or whether at the same time that signaling strobe is going off, we are verbally expressing that message over the speaker system. You know you've done what you can to get both that audible and that visual notification across to all end users. Now, looking at that from an activation standpoint, we have a number of different ways in which you can activate the Alertus solution. Now, all of which I will show you shortly, but you can do it from either your desktop device. So we have the Alertus desktop console, so you can select any preset messages, you can customize those messages from the desktop itself. Or as we mentioned, you have the same capability from your cell phone device, so you can select those presets or customize that message on the fly and distribute from wherever you are. That portable activation device is incredibly useful for you to be able to initiate that emergency from no matter where you are. Now, looking at that desktop console, as you can see here, we can log in and we can go straight to the preset messages. We can then select that preset message that we may want to send out. In this event, let's use a code red message that we are going to distribute. It's always going to tell you the end devices that we will be activating. And here you are going to see the desktop notification take over the full screen of the presentation. At the same time, the alert beacons are going to be triggered. I can acknowledge that message. And from there, I can go ahead and cancel that message once that emergency event is over. Likewise, once that event is over, I could go in to my preset activations. I could select the all clear message and distribute that across all endpoints as well. Again, a very effective way of capturing people's attention and getting that message across. So that's the desktop notification. Now, if we were to look at the other resources that we've discussed today, here you can see our demonstration wall. We have our alert beacons, we have our text-to-speech speaker, we have our VoIP phone, and we have the variety of other activation methods that you can see here, the duress buttons. So if I was to go over and activate one of these buttons, I could push the emergency button here. That is then going to trigger the alert beacon. the VoIP phone.
Device name North Lobby initiated a panic button activation at 7:26 and 29 seconds. Device is located at security desk.
So as you can see, we had both the alert beacon going off at the same time the VoIP phone had kicked in, and we had the verbal
Device name North
representation
Lobby initiated a panic button activation at 7:26 and 29
of
seconds.
that message as well.
Device is located at security desk.
So from the variety of activation methods, whether it's logging into your desktop console to trigger that message, or whether it's simply pushing a preset hardwired panic button, you can have the confidence to know that that message that we have put in place is going to be distributed both verbally and visually across all the endpoints that we are looking to leverage. So you have multiple activation devices that you can utilize to get that message across. Having a look at those duress buttons that we pushed, these are all customizable from the color scheme to the actual text that you want visually represented on those duress buttons, which are great because of the fact that these trigger preset alerts. So the text that are on these buttons are tied to that preset message that you are looking to distribute. So in the event of that emergency, whether it's a lockdown, an all clear, a fire, or just a general emergency, you can push that button and the emergency notification is going to be distributed accordingly. Taking that one step further, we also have our discrete USB panic buttons. These can be strategically located underneath desks or in discrete areas where once pushed, that internal notification is going to be distributed so that the security staff or managerial staff can then receive that notification and act accordingly, whether or not that is going to deal with that emergency situation or do a full system activation and distribute that emergency notification across all endpoints. So wrapping things up from an activation standpoint, you can see from this slide that we give you both the full system activation capability, where you can send out that message to all the endpoints, whether that's desktops, whether it's VoIP phones, speaker systems, whatever it may be, the alert beacons, however we're getting that message across. But at the same time, we give you the ability to have your staff alert you in the event of an emergency as well, whether that's from the report incident feature on the recipient app, whether that's someone pushing a discrete USB panic button, or whether or not it's somebody utilizing the desktop panic button that when clicked brings up all the details of the logged in user of that computer so that they can type in whatever that information is from that intruder. They can then send that alert internally, and those first responders can then respond accordingly. So not only do you now have the ability to activate the full system in the event of that emergency, but your staff now have the ability to notify you in the event of an emergency as well. Now, to wrap things up, this slide just shows you the actual scenario and the sequence of events that gets that message out. So on the left, you have the variety of different triggering events, whether it is the pushing of that panic button or the automation of a fire panel being pulled and that message being distributed. We also have automatic weather feeds. So we pull weather alerts from AccuWeather. These can be geographically tied to your location. So in the event of any weather emergency, you will be notified in advance. That can be automated, so that message is going to be distributed without you having to check the weather, without you having to configure and send that message out. We are pulling those feeds and distributing them automatically. So whatever those triggering events are, they are going to trigger the Alertus server to then distribute those messages across all the endpoints. We are an on-premise solution, so we are going to sit behind your firewall on your local area network. And all those endpoints that we are leveraging are going to be utilized from whether it is a visual or whether it is that audible standpoint. Now, you may have gathered that from this presentation, we're not necessarily an off-the-shelf solution. We are very much tailored to the end user, their wants and needs in that environment as a whole. So if you do have a project, we do offer on-site professional consulting services. So our on-site professional consultant will come out, we can build that project for you based on the infrastructure that you already have in place that we can leverage, and giving you advice on where we feel that you are vulnerable and how we can fill those gaps for you. Now, from a pricing standpoint, you would be purchasing the software up front, the software license up front. You would then purchase any hardware devices or any further integrations that you would want Alertus to make for you, whether that's an integration with, say, your PA system, your fire panels, or your VoIP phones. Likewise, if you were to utilize your desktops, you would purchase the desktop licenses up front, and those are all one-time upfront costs. Thereafter, you just have your annual notification, software, and support fee that's going to give you all those customizable desktop features, unlimited mobile app users from both an activator and a recipient standpoint. You have the capability to override those digital signs. You have the desktop panic button, the automated weather reporting, biannual updates, and 24/7 support with that enhanced notification software and support. Now, if anybody does have any projects that you would like us to discuss and you'd like us to build out for you and give you a general idea of the scope and size of that project and what would be required, you can reach out to me directly on the email address that's located here. You will receive a follow-up email after this webinar. I want to thank everyone for joining today. If you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out directly or utilize the chat feature now to be able to send that message across.
Thank you, Oliver. We're now beginning the Q&A session of our presentation. If you have a question, please submit them through the chat or question box. Please note if we do not get to your question during this session, a representative will reach out to you or answer your question directly. A recording of this webinar will also be shared with you today after today's presentation. Now let's begin with our first question. Can the alert beacon be set up without the sounders activated?
That's a good question, and the answer is yes. So if you did want to utilize the alert beacon from both a visual and audible standpoint, that 106 decibel speaker can be activated with a siren tone to be able to capture the attention of those individuals within the immediate surrounding. As I mentioned before, you're going to have the LED flashing lights on there, all of which have customizable features in terms of the sequence of flashing lights, and you have the flexibility of including the audible device notification as well on that alert beacon.
Next question. Is there a way to integrate the panic buttons with an access control system?
Yes, there is. As I mentioned before, when we're building out these projects, we do so with the if this, then that scenario in mind. So during the implementation phase, we ask the questions as to, in the event of this scenario, what would you like the appropriate actions to be? Obviously, we're going to distribute that message that's tied to that panic button, whether it's an emergency or a lockdown message. But at the same time, if we are utilizing that access control system, we want to be able to trigger those actions in tandem or parallel to that message going out. So in the event of that lockdown, if that panic button is pushed, that lockdown button is also going to tie into the access control system and securely tie up that location, as well as distributing that message across all endpoints.
All right, next question. Can the Alertus phone notification system be configured where it notifies only specific floors or departments?
That's a great question, and the answer is yes, and it's something that we really do focus on. Our grouping capabilities can stretch from building to building, from a floor on the building, right down to the individual user that's sending and receiving that messages. those messages. So ultimately, we want to put you in control as to who is receiving that message and how that message is being received. Our grouping capabilities allow us to do that. You can directly target certain buildings. You can directly target certain phones or desktops that you wish to notify those end users of. Again, this is all something that would be discussed in the implementation phase to ensure that not only the appropriate preset messages are set up accordingly, but also the group so that you can directly target those individuals that should be notified in the event of that emergency.
Here's our last question. Does Alertus sell directly to end users or through integrators?
The answer is both. So we can send to the end user, we can sell to the end user directly, but also integrators and resellers can utilize and sell our product as well.
Thank you, Oliver. We have now concluded the Q&A session of our presentation. If you have any questions or need additional information, please feel free to email marketing@alertus.com, and we'll be happy to assist you. If you're looking for more information on Alertus and our solutions, visit our website at www.alertus.com. If you're interested in upcoming webinars, please visit alertus.com/webinars to see the full schedule. Thank you for joining today's webinar, and we look forward to meeting you again soon.